Hello, everybody. You got Anthony Brogdon, and I got a guy on my channel, and he ready to roll. Man, I'm so excited that he's on Strong Inspirations. I don't know how I found him, but I did, and he said, let me tell you my story. Now, what I'm trying to do, my friends, is just find people with interesting stories so that people can't say that they don't know some Black history. Because if you watch this, you learning some of everything. And one of the things that I've already talked about in some detail, but I ain't covered everything, as you would tell, is about the Seminole Indians and the Black Indians and the Buffalo Soldiers. There's more to be told about that. That's a lead into what my guest is going to talk about today, because there's so many stories and I want you to know them. So do me a favor, my brothers and my sisters, hit that subscribe button on the channel so I can, know who's watching me. And I'll send you a thank you. Hit the like button on this video, because you're going to really be amazed at what this man has got to tell you. It's going to blow your mind. I bet you. Watch out. Hit the notifications bell, because then when the videos come up, you get a bing and say, hey, it's time to watch a Strong Inspiration. And I'm doing 4 or 5 of them a week. I know you can tell. Tell somebody about Strong Inspiration. See, I know you now you going out a little bit more and you running around and you telling them sisters, hey, I got some good Black history I can tell you. You act like you done read a big book and you got it off Strong Inspirations. You don't want nobody to know where you finding this stuff. Don't keep it to yourself. Come on now. Come on, you sisters. I know you out there watching. I get the comments and stuff like that. And you're saying, hey, I want, if I meet a guy, I want to see if he know about Strong Inspirations. Come on, don't do that. Tell him about it. Let's enlighten each other. The other thing I want you to do is, as you know, I'm a filmmaker. That's right. I'm serious about this game. I'm a historian. This movie came out in 2017, and I showed it in over 40 cities across the country on my own dime. I even was in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and they gave me a proclamation. I don't know if you can see it, but that's the proclamation right there. That's my pride and joy. I got it from the state of Oklahoma for showing this movie. So come on, I want you to watch it. It's how slaves went to college and Black millionaires in the 1800s. Slaves who who bought their freedom. It's all in my film, and it's streaming on Amazon. And then the movie did so well, I wrote a book to go with it, right? It's called Black Business Book. The book got over 200 facts, and I number the facts so you can easily tell somebody who else got the book, man, I need you to read fact number 93. It's going to blow your mind. And then you can easily reference the fact in the book to where I found it, because I give you the link in the back of the book. So you're going to be saying, oh, man, I ain't know that. Yeah, well, there it is. I didn't know it either till I did the research. And then I made it available for you. And it's called Black Business Book. It's an easy read, and it's also on Amazon. But really, tell you the truth, if you want to, you can just go to my website, businessintheblack.net. Just go there, order the book. I'll autograph it. I'll ship it out the same day. You all might hear me talk about the word strong. Strong stands for strength, tenacity, resilience, and a sense of oneness, nobility, and grace. And that's my lead into my guest today. This is a strong brother. I've had people that have told me, hey man, you got to get with Joseph Hill. I got the name right too. You got to get with him. All right. So I'm so happy he's on the channel, brother. Introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Let's get it on.
All right. Well, first of all, thanks for having me on Strong Inspiration. As you said, my name is Joseph Hill. I'm in St. Paul, Minnesota. I'm originally from Chicago. I'm a retired television journalist. I did that for 23 years. I still dabble in journalism and always will. I'm also a documentary filmmaker, and that's what we'll talk about. My previous documentary, which was called Black Border Warriors, semicolon, the Seminole Negro Indian Scouts.
Okay, hold on. I got to stop there because I want to get into you just a tad. You a journalist, and you've been doing it a long time. Was there Black people in journalism? How did you get into that and then divert from that to filmmaking?
I mean, there have been Black people in journalism for
I know, yeah, but
a
I'm
long
just saying,
time. So,
you one of the pioneers, I guess, in some respects.
not really, man. I mean, I was a pioneer of sorts in local communities, but you know, but them and brothers who've been on television for television news for a number of years now. But yeah, I started out in ironically, man, I started out in South Central Nebraska. It's probably the only brother in a 200-mile radius at times, man.
Is that right?
Yeah, awful lot of times.
Okay, let me delve in that just a second. How'd that make you feel?
I was fine, man. I was just happy to be reporting. Seriously.
How did it make you feel to not see other Black people for the most part?
That was a challenge, but tell you the truth, man, it was such a grind doing what I did. Like I said, I was a bureau chief, but my station, I was a bureau chief in Kearney, Nebraska. My base station was in Hastings, so that was 50 miles away. Of course, Malcolm X was, born in Omaha, but really never lived there.
Did you mind? Did you get stares? Did people stare at you saying, "Hey, what are you doing here?"
I not so much stares, but I don't know how many times I would do a story where I would go out to a farm and I would talk to the farmer or rancher, and then if I mentioned I was from Chicago, they would tell me about the good colored guy that they knew from Chicago when they were in the army. Everybody met some, good colored guy they knew in the middle. This is like in the 80s, man. This is like early 80s.
So now, as we go into the topic at hand, you've done a documentary. Tell us about the film.
Magazine. I picked it up and I'm flipping through it, and I see this story on these Black Seminole and Seminole Negro Indian Scouts, and I'm a historian, brother. I know my history.
Okay.
I never heard of these brothers, and I'm kind of like, what? Did my research, and then I found out that there were, they celebrated their history. These people, they're Black Seminoles still in Texas, and actually all over the country, but especially in the Brackettville, San Antonio, Del Rio area. And they have something they call Seminole Days. Every year, annually, the third weekend in September, from Friday to Sunday, they have Seminole Days. But let me tell you the story of the Black Seminole.
Yes.
You start in the late 1700s, early 1800s, like 1780s, 1790s, and then the turn of the 19th century in the early 1800s. Enslaved people were running away from plantations in South Carolina and Georgia. And instead of going north, like you would think most people would try to run, but remember, we're talking about the deep South.
Yeah, right.
So most of the slaves who ran away, Underground Railroads, Harriet Tubman, Frederick Douglass, those people, they were in the upper South and they were in border states, basically Virginia, Kentucky, Maryland.
Right.
Well, if you think about it, if brothers and sisters are in South Carolina and Georgia, they got way too much territory to traverse to not get caught going north. Anyway, these brothers went south. And originally they were in the northern part of Florida, and the Spanish, because there's a lot of international intrigue going on at this period of time too, between the new US government, the British, and the Spanish. And it was all about Florida. Well, the Spanish decided with these Black people running down here, so we're going to train them to fight and also give them weapons.
Right.
So that's where you get into Fort Negro. I'm sure you've heard of Fort Negro and Garcon. Have you ever heard of all this stuff?
Yep.
All right, okay. So that was some of that. But some of these other Seminoles went further south to get away from slave catchers, and they went into southern and central Florida, and they went into the Everglades. They went into places that white folks weren't going into. But remember, these brothers, a lot of them had originally come from West Africa, and they just adapted. You know, they knew how to live in the jungle. They knew how to survive. They knew how to grow food, all of that. And so they started forming their own enclave, their own communities. At the same time, a branch of the Creek tribe in Alabama had a political argument with them and broke away. And the Creeks actually called them a bastardized word for Cimarron, which means runaways.
Right.
They called them Seminole.
Right.
So you got Native Americans coming from Alabama going into South Central and Southern Florida. At the same time, you got these enslaved Black folk going into Florida.
Right.
They formed, and Alcione talks about this, you know, white people would want to say that these Blacks were the slaves of the Seminoles, but it wasn't the kind of slavery that the American slavery was, with the harsh, you know, plantation life, all of that. It was more, you paid tribute to the chief and you fought with the Seminole if they had to fight. Okay. But they had their own separate communities, they had their own weapons, and they intermingled. So you had a lot of racial mixing going on. And the main leader of the Black Seminole, his father, his name is John Horse.
Right.
Every school child in America should know about John Horse. But John Horse, father was a Seminole warrior, and his mother was a former enslaved woman who had escaped. John Horse, by the way, was a contemporary of the great Seminole chief Osceola. Okay. They were running buddies. Matter of fact, when they started fighting the Seminole Wars, John Horse and Osceola at one time were in an American prison together in Florida, and they escaped. So if you've heard of Osceola, Osceola's wife, by the way, was a former enslaved African-American woman, which was what started one of the Seminole Wars. There were 3 Seminole Wars in Florida. The main one started because the Georgia militia, along with slave catchers, went into Florida to try to take these slaves back, and they ended up getting their butts killed. And that's what started the Seminole Wars. Okay. So we're talking about Andrew Jackson, we're talking about General Gage, all during the Seminole Wars. So if you see any sketches, and there are some, of the meetings that the Seminoles would have with the US government, you'd always see African people there dressed as Seminoles. Okay. Okay, Abraham was one of them, because they would interpret, because they knew how to speak English and they knew how to speak Muskogee, which was a Seminole language. They were the interpreters, right? Okay. And they understood how to deal with white people. So I got you. They had an importance. So anyway, we'll fast forward. So we got the Seminole Wars, and this involves Andrew Jackson. Anybody that knows American history knows about Andrew Jackson, knows that he was the Donald Trump of his day. You know, he was a racist general who went on to become president of the United States. But when it came to people of color, he wasn't a very good man. I got you. They ended up burning a lot of the Seminole villages, and they worked out a treaty where they told John Horse and they told the African leaders, if you all stop fighting, we've got some land for you, because they were trying to get everybody out of Florida. They wanted Florida for themselves. They said, we got some land for you, much to the west. Right. That land happened to be in Oklahoma. Right. It was the so-called Indian Territory. Right. So most of the Blacks went on what the Cherokee called the Trail of Tears. Right. So we're talking, 1840. They go on the Trail of Tears, and now some of them actually walked all the way from Florida to Oklahoma, and then some went by ship, and they went from the coast of Florida, around Florida, the Gulf of Mexico, and the ships usually docked in New Orleans, and then they went from New Orleans, from Louisiana, up to the north to Oklahoma. I got you. Okay, so we got African Americans settling in Oklahoma. They had never given up their weapons. Well, the Creek, remember the Seminole had kind of gotten away from the Creek, but the Creek were the political power, in that particular part of Oklahoma.
I got
And
you.
the Creeks were what you called, if anybody's seen any of the documentaries about Tulsa, the one that just played on CNN,
Right.
they talked about the 5 civilized tribes, and they named the Creek and the Seminole and Cherokee and the Choctaw and the Chickasaw. Those
Right.
are the 5 Seminole
Right.
so-called civilized tribes. And real briefly, those tribes tried to act like white people. They were called what's called acculturated, which meant they were Uncle Toms. They tried to act like white people, so they tried to have like slaves for real. Well, the Seminole weren't putting up with Black Seminole under John Horace. They weren't putting up with this. Plus, remember, they had never given up their weapons.
Right.
They said, the hell with this.
Right.
John Horace and 300 of the Black Seminole, along with a Seminole chief named Wildcat, and about 150 to 200 Seminole. Well, let me fast forward. John Horace and Wildcat took a trip through Texas down into Mexico, and they went all the way to Mexico City, brother. They negotiated with the Mexican government. Mexican government said, you all come down here and live free. Here's the deal. We want you to fight hostile Indians on our northern border because they're giving us hell, but you can have farmland and you can be free people.
Right.
They said, cool. Here's the other thing. When I was doing my research, Mexico abolished slavery in depends on what you read, 1828, 1829, Mexico had abolished slavery. So almost 30 years before Lincoln came along.
Right.
And I was reading in a Mexican paper called El Singlor. I got a English version of it. And they were saying stuff, brother, like, why does the US enslave our Black brothers? Don't they understand that all men are equal? This is Mexico, right?
Right.
I'm reading this and I'm kind of going, what?
Right.
You know why, brother?
Why?
The first president of the Republic of Mexico was a man named, and everybody should know this and they don't, Vicente Guerrero. Guerrero province in Mexico is named after him.
Okay.
He was half Black. He was Obama before Obama.
Yeah.
If you see, and there's plenty of, if you look up Vicente Guerrero, you will see paintings of him, and he looks like a light-skinned brother with curly hair.
Yeah, okay.
All right?
Okay.
But he had been killed off, but in the Constitution, they had said that there was no more slavery, so they welcomed these brothers.
All right.
So John Horace and Wildcat go back and they get their people, and in 1850, they come back, and part of the documentary is I've got an account of a white woman describing all these Black people in wagons coming out of Texas, across the Rio Grande into Mexico. They settle in a place called Coahuila province, which is the cities of like Piedras Negras, Musquez, right by the Mexican border. They settled in that area. They ended up fighting Indians for the Mexican government for about 20 years.
Wow.
So these brothers they had gone from being desert fighters, or swamp fighters rather, in Florida, to being desert fighters in the Southwest, right? They were great trackers. They could speak some of the native languages, and they basically were mercenaries for the Mexican government. And I've gotten, some people have said, well, these brothers fought against Indians and blah, 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 which I understand that.
Yeah.
But we're looking at history from 2021, and we're trying to transport ourselves back
I got you.
150 years, and things were different then, okay?
Right, sure.
As a historian, you have to look at people in their time,
yes,
for their time, and for what they were doing.
Right.
These brothers, in fact, there was just a quick story. There was another group that should have come with John Horace, but they didn't. Another group of Black folk from Oklahoma. They came through Texas. They got caught up by the Comanche, and every single one of them was killed except for one person. They saved a little girl, a Black girl, so they could skin her, literally take her skin off to see what was under it, because they wasn't used to seeing Black people. Then they ended up killing her. Sure. While the Black Seminole were in Mexico, while the men were off either, hunting or fighting, Comanche, Lipan Apache, or some of the other tribes that they fought against were raiding their farms, stealing their children, killing people. So it was the Southwest, especially that Texas-Mexican border, was ruthless. And it was every man for himself.
I got you.
So it was a warlike place. All right, so let's fast forward. So from 1850 to 1870, these brothers in Mexico fighting Indians for the Mexican government. 1870, the Civil War is over. Texas is trying to like get settled by ranchers and farmers and, you know, make money. Well, what was going on with the raiding tribes coming across the Mexican border, and it was basically Kiowa, Comanche, Kickapoo, Southern Cheyenne, Lipan Apache. They were coming across, they were raiding, they were damn near wiping out the livestock industry in Texas of horses and cattle, to the point that these white Texans went to the US government and said, you all got to do something. We got to stop these raids. These white scouts didn't know the area, couldn't track, couldn't even find these Indians, let alone fight them, right? They go down to Mexico, the US government does, they send a delegation down and they talk to Black Seminole into coming back to the United States.
Yeah.
Show you reversal of history, to come to Old Fort Clark, which is Old Fort Clark in Brackettville. Right. And Fort Concho and a couple other forts on near the border to fight for the US government. And they formed a scouting unit, a commando unit called the Seminole Negro Indian Scouts.
Really?
All right. So it was a select group of brothers who could scout, track, and fight. And a lot of them spoke the native languages. And they were tremendous horsemen on top of it. So they formed this scouting unit, Seminole Negro Indian Scouts. And for the first couple of years, they really didn't do that much fighting. Not a lot happened. And here's why. You had white officers who were racist. A lot of them were West Point trained. And they looked at these, you know, raggedy looking, Indian looking brothers and underestimated them and didn't have any respect for them, so they didn't use them. But then you get a guy who was a lieutenant who got put in charge of them. His name was John Lapham Bullis. Right. He had Black troops fighting under him in the Civil War because he was a former Union officer. Right. Ironically, he was from upstate New York, and he was from a Quaker family, a family that didn't fight, but he fought. And he actually was captured during the Civil War and spent time in Libby Prison, which is in Richmond. So John Lapham Bullis knew how to deal with Black people. He respected these brothers. They respected him. So he started using them, and they started going out and fighting. And in an 8-year period of time, from 1873 to 1881, these brothers, and sometimes they fought with larger troops, sometimes they fought as commando units, okay? Fought all these battles. Listen to this, brother. 4 Medal of Honor winners, never lost a man in battle. Yeah. I'm gonna repeat this. 4 living Medal of Honor winners, yes, never lost a man in battle. Yes. That was the Seminole Negro Indian Scouts. Yeah. Sometimes, and you had referenced Buffalo Soldiers when you first communicated with me. And it's interesting because we got Buffalo Soldier reenactors like all over America, right? Oh, sure. We don't have any Seminole Negro Indian Scout reenactors anywhere. Nobody knows a thing about these brothers. And in all honesty, they did more, fought more, and were badder dudes. Wow. Another thing, now, you can't classify them as Buffalo Soldiers because sometimes they did scout for the 9th and 10th Cavalries, which were the Buffalo Soldiers. Yeah. They actually fought in some battles together, especially in New Mexico during what was called Victorio's War. Right. And the great Apache Chief Victorio, they were the ones that basically they chased him into Mexico. He was trapped by Mexican federales, and he ended up committing suicide, and they killed all of his followers. So that's, and there's stories within stories in this documentary. Yeah. But that in brief is the Seminole Negro Indian Scouts. And here's what happened to them. One of the reasons that history's forgotten them. Once they pacified the West, once they there's a part, and I'm going to show you all some books in just a second.
Yes.
There's a part in their story where these dudes are scouting to look for Indians to fight they couldn't find anymore. That's how good of a job they did, right? So the US government didn't need them anymore.
Oh.
All of a sudden, listen to this, and it's the same thing that the US government's done to people of color in the history of this country.
Yes.
They said, you know what? You guys aren't really Indians. So we're not going to pay you any more as scouts, and we're not going to supply food and material, because all the times that these brothers fought, they were supplying farm equipment and food and material for their families.
Right.
And paying these brothers.
Right.
All of a sudden they said, you're not really Indians, and basically we don't need you anymore. You know, Bullis and a number of the white officers, to their credit, fought like hell to try to get these brothers compensated.
Right.
Because the people started starving, to tell you the truth.
Right.
But this is what happened to them. So
now it's I guess the only one question. When I hear the word scout, I don't think of a warrior or something like that. I actually think of somebody that went out ahead of the battle and looked around and said, "Oh, they over there," and then came back and did some stuff.
No. When you scout, when you go out in front, a lot of times you find the enemy.
Okay.
So when you find the enemy, brother, you gotta fight.
Okay, because scout kind of makes me think I just went looking and didn't do anything.
No.
So now, what's
brothers, look, when they ran into Comanche, Apache, Kiowa warriors, they weren't waving hi to them.
Yeah, I got you.
They had to fight. They had to try to get their butts back to warn everybody else. But quite often they had to fight then and there. They had to do hand-to-hand combat quite often. Like I said, they never lost a man in battle.
Man, that's an incredible story. Yeah. What now, as we kind of come to a close for what have you, what's the name of your documentary?
Once again, it's called Black Border Warriors, semicolon, the Seminole Negro Indian Scouts.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's several books written about the Seminole Negro Indian Scouts and the Black Seminole. Okay. And I'm just going to show you all some.
Yeah, please.
Talk about them briefly. One is called Freedom on the Border.
Okay.
And it's by Kevin, common spelling, Mulroy, Mulroy. And he's a professor out of UCLA. The other one, and this is the one where I interviewed Alcione Amos for. So a guy named Kenneth Wiggins Porter, sociologist, wrote this amazing book on the Black Seminole. Well, he gathered all the information and was writing the book, and it's simply called The Black Seminole.
I got you.
These are actually some of the scouts on the cover. There are a couple more. One of the military leaders of, so all of the generals and colonels who were the regimental commanders of the Black Seminole were veterans of the Civil War, were Union officers in the Civil War.
Right.
One of them is a guy named Ronald Slidell McKenzie.
Okay.
McKenzie, there was a movie called Rio Grande back in the day, starring John Wayne.
Yeah.
It was about McKenzie, and it was about the Seminole Negro Indian Scouts, except guess what, folks?
Yeah.
Made in the 50s, and nothing black is in this film except maybe the horses. But McKenzie's nickname that the Native Americans gave him was Bad Hand. You know why? Because he had 2 fingers on his right hand shot off at the Battle of Cabin Creek in the Civil War.
I got you.
But he was a fighting colonel. Lee Young is the first African-American Texas Ranger.
Oh, okay.
Lee Young is a Black Seminole.
Okay.
And now he's chief of the Black Seminole.
Okay.
Lee Young is the prototype. I don't know if y'all ever see that terrible television show called Walker, Texas Ranger.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Right, you know the brother, the sidekick brother?
Yeah.
That's supposed to be Lee Young.
I got you.
He literally advised them for the series.
I got you.
Stories within stories. One more story I'll tell you all real quick before we end. One of the first Medal of Honor winner who was a
Yeah.
black Seminole,
Yes.
was a guy named Adam Payne. Nowadays, they would probably classify Adam Payne as a psychopath or sociopath. He was a very dangerous man. He was a black Seminole, but even the other black Seminoles were wary of this brother. He wore a buffalo horn helmet with horns when he fought. He had 2 guns and a Bowie knife and a shotgun. Totally fearless. He got a Medal of Honor basically for killing a bunch of Comanche at a place called Palo Duro Canyon.
Okay.
He ended up later on quitting the Scouts and becoming an outlaw, and he was wanted. So he comes back to Brackettville for a fandango on Christmas night. This is like 1879, 1878.
Right.
And the sheriff named Windus, who was in Brackettville, got word that he was back in town. But he was such a dangerous brother that these white officers weren't about to approach him face to face. So Windus, while Bad Man was drunk, snuck up behind him, shot him with both barrels of the shotgun, was so close to him that his clothes caught fire. That's how Bad Man died. But here's the essence of the story.
Yeah.
Windus, Clarence Windus, white man in Brackettville,
Right.
was a Medal of Honor winner. Adam Payne, Bad Man, was a Medal of Honor winner. The first and only time in American history that one Medal of Honor recipient killed another Medal of Honor.
Oh my God. Hey, everybody, this is what we do on Strong Inspirations, man. I find these people with these amazing stories and I let them tell it. I thank you so very much for coming on the show. Everybody hit the subscribe button, hit the like button on this video, hit that notifications bell, tell somebody about Strong Inspirations. And to you, my brother, I say with all sincerity, I want you to stay strong, stay safe, stay on your grind, because we love what you're doing. Get that movie out so we can watch it. Everybody, thank you again. Watch my movie, read my book. We out. Have a great day. Stay blessed, stay strong. Bye-bye.